You know, some years just kind of drift by on the calendar. But others act like a furnace. They melt down everything we thought we knew and forge something completely new. Today, we're jumping into one of those years, 1911.
So, what really makes a single year a turning point? Is it one huge catastrophic event? A groundbreaking court case? Maybe a wave of brand new ideas? Well, for 1911, the answer was, yep, all of that. And it all happened pretty much at the same time.
And that's exactly what we're going to explore. We're going to see how the incredible pressures of 1911, from absolute tragedy to amazing triumph, really created the framework for the modern world that we're all living in today. So, let's dive in. Okay, to really get 1911, you have to feel the tension that was in the air. America was literally caught between two massive opposing forces. On one hand, the wild, unchecked wealth of the Gilded Age, and on the other, this rising roar for reform from the Progressive Era. I mean, just think about it. In 1911 alone, over 878,000 immigrants arrived, and they were all fueling these factories that were making a few people incredibly rich. But for the actual workers, and that includes kids, the conditions were often brutal, dangerous, and just deeply unfair. The whole thing was a powder keg just waiting for a spark. And on March 25, 1911, in New York City, that spark finally ignited. The abstract problem of industrial greed and neglect was about to get a name, a face, and a horrifically high body count, all at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory.
146. That's how many people died. They were mostly young women and girls, many of them recent Jewish and Italian immigrants who'd come to America looking for a better life. And in about 20 minutes, all of those dreams just turned to ash.
And the most tragic part? None of this was an accident. These were choices. The bosses locked the doors to keep workers from taking breaks or stealing scraps. The fire escape was so flimsy it buckled immediately. The doors opened inward, which meant the panicked crowd just sealed its own fate. This wasn't just a fire, it was a disaster by design. This quote from the New York Times the very next day it's absolutely gut-wrenching. The building itself, the brick and mortar, was fine. The owners had invested in that. But the people inside, they were treated as completely expendable. That single sentence just laid the horrifying truth bare for the whole country to see. And watching from the street below, among thousands of horrified onlookers, was a young woman named Frances Perkins. What she saw that day, people jumping from the windows because it was the only way out, it seared itself into her memory. It set her on a path that would completely change the relationship between America and its workers forever. Remember her name. We are definitely coming back to her.
So while that fire exposed the terrible human cost of greed on the factory floor, a totally different battle was being fought in the nation's highest court. This one was against the corporate titans who controlled the entire economy.
You basically had two sides. In one corner, John D. Rockefeller, the world's very first billionaire, whose company, Standard Oil, was the definition of a monopoly. And in the other corner, you had the rising power of investigative journalism led by people like Ida Tarbell. She painstakingly documented and exposed all of Rockefeller's ruthless tactics. This was the setup for a massive legal showdown. Then, on May 15th, just a few weeks after the Triangle Fire, the Supreme Court drops this landmark decision, and they introduce a new idea called the rule of reason. Basically, they said the goal wasn't to break up every single big company, just the ones that unreasonably crushed all their competition. So the big question became, what in the world does the court think is unreasonable?
Well, the court came up with a really simple but powerful three-part test. Did the company's actions hurt you, the consumer? Did they jack up prices? Did they cut back on how much stuff they were making? And did they make a worse product because they had no competition? For Standard Oil, the answers were a loud yes to all three, and that made its monopoly unreasonable and illegal.
And the result of that? The biggest corporate monopoly on the planet was ordered to be broken up into 34 separate competing companies. This was an absolute earthquake in the business world. It was a signal that the government wasn't going to let corporate giants play by their own rules anymore. So you've got this horrible fire that's forcing a national conversation about workers' rights. You've got this massive court case that's rewriting the rules for corporations. But the transformation didn't stop there. Oh no, it was also happening at the ballot box. And when you lay it all out on a timeline, you see just how insane this period was. It's so compressed.
In the span of just 7 months, America sees the sparks for new safety laws, new economic rules, and new political rights all at the same time. It really was a crucible.
And that victory for women's suffrage in California, it was not a sure thing, not even close. Look at this, it passed by a razor-thin margin, just over 3,500 votes. That's an average of one single vote per precinct. The suffragists had to fight for every last ballot, using everything they had to win over a very skeptical public.
Now let's go back to Frances Perkins, the woman who saw the fire. The public outrage from that day led to commissions that totally rewrote New York's labor laws, and Perkins was right at the heart of that effort. And she never stopped fighting. Years later, she became America's first female cabinet member, and she turned the trauma of 1911 into the bedrock of the New Deal. The minimum wage, the 40-hour workweek, the end of child labor, all of it has roots in the ashes of that factory.
But this wild year wasn't just about reacting to tragedy and reining in the old guard. It was also about racing full speed toward the future. Amidst all the conflict, there was this incredible explosion of innovation, and this feeling that humanity was breaking all sorts of boundaries.
You could even see the spirit in sports. Take a look at baseball star Ty Cobb. His season in 1911 was absolutely legendary. A .420 batting average? Are you kidding me? That's astronomical. It was a perfect reflection of the whole era, a time of just pushing limits and setting records that nobody thought were possible.
And this feeling was everywhere. The very first Indy 500 roared to life. A pilot landed a plane on a moving warship for the first time, basically inventing the aircraft carrier on the spot. The first flight across the entire U.S. began, even if it did involve 16 crash landings along the way, and Harriet Quimby became the first American woman to earn a pilot's license. It really felt like anything was possible.
And that, right there, is the key takeaway. All of these things were happening at once. The fight for a safer workplace, the battle for a fair economic, the struggle for equal rights, and this incredible race toward a new technological frontier. In 1911, all those forces just collided.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last thought. When you look at the headlines today, all the debates about corporate power, worker safety, and how fast technology is changing our lives, you gotta wonder, how different are the core challenges we face today from the ones America faced in that incredible, chaotic, crucible year of 1911?